The galactic concord had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 7 ancient races had divided the universe among themselves like children sharing a meal. Each race controlled thousands of star systems. Each race commanded fleets of warships that could burn worlds to ash. They called themselves the Elder Races, and they believed they were the masters of all creation. The Kethari were the oldest. They had sailed between stars when most species still lived in caves. Their ships were elegant and deadly, built from materials that younger races could not understand. The Vethkai were the cruelest. They had conquered 60 species and enslaved them all. Their empire stretched across an entire arm of the galaxy, and their warriors knew no mercy. The Drawn were the traders. They controlled the flow of goods and information, growing rich on the labor of others. The Morhani were the scientists. They had unlocked secrets of the universe that other races could only dream about. The Tessari were the diplomats. They spoke softly and carried sharp knives behind their backs. The Zoloth were the builders. Their stations and habitats floated in the void like metal cities. And the Arvani were the watchers. They observed everything and trusted no one. Together, these 7 races had created the Concord. They met in a great station, at the center of the galaxy, where they made laws and divided territories. They decided which younger races could join their civilization and which would be left to struggle alone. They were powerful beyond measure, and they knew it. When humanity first reached beyond their home star, the Concord noticed them with mild interest. A young species from a small blue planet had finally learned to travel between worlds. It was not unusual. Many species reached this point in their development. Most of them died within a few centuries, destroyed by war or disease or their own foolishness. The Concord watched humanity the way a person might watch an insect crawling across the floor. Curious, perhaps, but not concerned. Human diplomats traveled to the great station. They wore simple clothes and spoke with quiet voices. They asked for permission to expand beyond their single star system. They asked for trade agreements. They asked for knowledge and friendship. The Concord laughed at them. "You are young," the Kethari ambassador said. "You have existed for barely a moment compared to us. You must earn your place among the stars." "We are patient," the human diplomat replied. "We are willing to wait and learn." The Vethkai ambassador looked at the human with open disgust. His scales were deep purple, and his eyes burned with ancient cruelty. "You are weak," he said. "Your species has only 200 ships. We have 10,000. You control 1 star. We control 8,000. Know your place, little creatures." The human diplomat smiled politely and said nothing. The Concord granted humanity a single star system, 1 sun, 8 planets, a handful of moons. It was less than they gave to species they considered utterly worthless. It was an insult dressed up as a gift. Humanity accepted it with grace. "Thank you for your generosity," the human diplomat said. "We will make good use of what you have given us." The Vethkai ambassador laughed so hard that his scales rattled. "Make good use of it," he repeated. "Yes, little human. Make good use of your tiny corner of the galaxy. Perhaps in 1,000 years, if you survive that long, we might give you another system." The human diplomat bowed and left the chamber. For the next 200 years, humanity did exactly what they said they would do. They made good use of their single system. They built stations around their planets. They mined asteroids. They traded with anyone who would trade with them. Their ships traveled throughout conquered space, carrying goods and passengers. They were always polite. They were always helpful. They never complained. The elder races forgot about them. This was a mistake. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital command station and looked down at the blue planet below. She was 63 years old, but modern medicine kept her body strong and her mind sharp. Her black hair was streaked with silver, and her dark eyes held a depth that made younger officers nervous. She had served in the human fleet for 40 years. She had watched and waited and prepared. "Admiral," her aide said, stepping onto the deck. "The latest intelligence reports from Concord Space." Tanaka took the datapad without looking away from Earth. She had read thousands of these reports over the years. She knew what they would say. The elder races were growing more aggressive. The Vethkai Dominion had conquered 3 more species in the past decade. The Concord did nothing to stop them. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak suffered. "Anything unusual?" she asked. "Yes, Admiral. The Vethkai are mobilizing a large fleet. Destination unknown." Tanaka felt something cold settle in her chest. She had known this day would come. She had spent her entire career preparing for it. But knowing something will happen and watching it happen are very different things. How large? She asked. 10,000 warships, Admiral. Perhaps more. Tanaka closed her eyes. 10,000 ships. The Vethkai had used half that number to exterminate the Krellian species 50 years ago. The Krellians had been a peaceful people. They had done nothing wrong except exist in space that the Vethkai wanted. Their entire civilization had been wiped out in a single month. Do we know the target? Tanaka asked. Not officially, but our sources within the Concord suggest. The aide hesitated. They suggest the target is us, Admiral. Tanaka opened her eyes. She looked at Earth, at the swirling clouds and blue oceans. 8 billion people lived on that planet. Billions more lived on the stations and colonies throughout the system. They had families. They had hopes and dreams. And somewhere in the darkness of space, 10,000 warships were coming to end all of that. Have they announced their intentions to the Concord? Tanaka asked. Yes, Admiral. The Vethkai Archon addressed the Council this morning. He claimed our system by right of power. He said any who objected could face his armada. The aide's voice was carefully neutral. No one objected. Tanaka felt something stir in her heart. It was not fear. She had moved past fear years ago. It was something colder and harder. It was the feeling she got when she looked at a problem that needed to be solved. Prepare my ship, she said. I am going to the Concord station. Admiral, is that wise? The Vethkai have effectively declared war on us. The other races have abandoned us. Going to the Concord station now would be necessary, Tanaka said. The universe is about to change. I want them to remember that we gave them a chance. The Concord chamber was vast. It could hold thousands of beings from dozens of species. But today, only the 7 elder race ambassadors were present. Along with their personal guards, they sat in floating chairs arranged in a circle, looking down at the small platform where petitioners stood to address them. Admiral Tanaka walked onto that platform alone. She wore her dress uniform, simple and black, with no medals or decorations. She carried no weapons. She looked up at the 7 ambassadors with an expression that revealed nothing. The Vethkai Archon leaned forward in his chair. He was enormous, even for his species, 3 meters of muscle and scale and barely contained violence. His teeth were sharp enough to tear through metal, and his claws had ended the lives of 100 enemies in personal combat. He ruled the Vethkai Dominion with absolute authority, and he had never met a creature he could not break. The human has come to beg, he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. How delightful. Tell me, little creature, what do you offer in exchange for your survival? Your ships? Your resources? Your people as slaves? Tanaka looked at him. She did not speak. Perhaps you have come to surrender, the Kethari ambassador said. He was ancient beyond measure, his skin like weathered stone, his eyes like dying stars. That would be the wise choice. The Vethkai are not known for their mercy, but perhaps if you grovel sufficiently, they might spare some of your population. Tanaka still did not speak. The Tesari ambassador shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Something about the human woman bothered her. She was too calm. Beings facing extinction should weep and plead and bargain. They should not stand in silence with eyes like deep water. Well, the Dran ambassador demanded. He was impatient by nature, and this small drama was wasting his time. Speak, human. Why have you come? Tanaka took a breath. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. It carried to every corner of the chamber. I have come to give you a warning, she said. The Vethkai Archon burst out laughing. The sound was like thunder in the enclosed space. A warning? You warn us? You have 200 ships, human. I am sending 10,000. What warning could you possibly give? I am warning you to turn back, Tanaka said. I am warning you to leave humanity alone. I am warning you that if you attack our system, you will regret it. The laughter spread to the other ambassadors. Even the ancient Kethari allowed himself a thin smile. The idea of humanity threatening the Concord was absurd. It was like a mouse threatening a mountain. You are brave, the Archon said. I will give you that. Stupid, but brave. Perhaps I will have your skull mounted in my throne room. A reminder of the day the humans tried to frighten the Vethkai. We are not trying to frighten you, Tanaka said. We are trying to save you. We have spent 200 years hoping this day would never come. We have smiled and traded and followed your rules. We have done everything possible to live in peace with your Concord. And now you have chosen war. We have not chosen war, the Archon said. We have chosen extermination. There is a difference. War implies that both sides have a chance of winning. You have no chance. You will simply cease to exist. Tanaka nodded slowly. That is what the Krellians thought. They believed they had no chance. They believed they could not fight back. They believed the universe was cruel and that the strong would always destroy the weak. She paused. We are not the Krellians. No, the Archon agreed. The Krellians lasted 3 weeks. I expect you will last 3 days. Tanaka looked at each of the ambassadors in turn. The Kethari, ancient and arrogant. The Vethkai, cruel and hungry. The Dran, greedy and indifferent. The Morani, curious but cold. The Tessari, calculating and false. The Zoloth, solid and unmoved. The Arvani, watching and waiting. You have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years, she said. You have never met a species that could challenge you. You have grown comfortable in your power. You have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who is truly prepared to fight. And you think humanity is such an enemy? The Morani ambassador asked. She was interested despite herself. The human's confidence was fascinating from a scientific perspective. Was it delusion? Religious faith? Some form of psychological defense mechanism? I think you are about to find out, Tanaka said. She turned and began to walk toward the chamber doors. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Wait, the Tessari ambassador called out. Is that all? You came all this way to deliver vague threats? And then leave? Tanaka stopped but did not turn around. I came to look you in the eyes. I wanted you to remember this moment. I wanted you to remember that we tried to warn you. Warn us of what? The Archon demanded. His amusement was fading, replaced by irritation. What do you think you can do against us? Now Tanaka turned. She looked directly at the Archon, and something in her eyes made even that massive predator feel a flicker of unease. For 200 years, she said, you have looked at humanity and seen weakness. You have seen a small species with a small fleet in a small system. You have seen creatures who smile and bow and accept insults without complaint. You have wondered why we are so quiet, why we never fight back, why we never demand more. She took a step toward the platform's edge. I will tell you why. We are quiet because we are patient. We do not fight back because we are waiting. We do not demand more because we are not ready yet. Ready for what? The Archon asked. Tanaka smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. You should not have done this. We gave you every chance. For 200 years, we hoped you would learn to see us as equals. We hoped you would choose peace. We hoped we would never have to show you what we have built in the darkness. What you have built. The Kethari ambassador leaned forward. What have you built, human? You will see, Tanaka said. Soon. Very soon. And when you do, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that we tried to warn you. I want you to remember that we gave you every chance to walk away. She turned and walked toward the doors again. You are insane, the Archon called after her. Your species is doomed, and you speak as if you have already won. Tanaka paused at the doors. She looked back one last time. We have not won, she said. But we will. And when we do, you will understand something important about humanity. You will understand why you should never have threatened our children. You will understand why patience is not the same as weakness. And you will understand why the quiet ones are often the most dangerous of all. She stepped through the doors and was gone. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Archon began to laugh again, and the other ambassadors joined him. The idea was ridiculous. Humanity had nothing. They were nothing. They would be destroyed within days of the fleet's arrival. But the Tessari ambassador did not laugh. She sat in her chair and thought about the human woman's eyes. There had been no fear in those eyes, no desperation, no false bravado. There had been something else, something that looked almost like pity. The Tessari ambassador was very old and very wise. She had seen many species rise and fall. She had watched civilizations burn and others be born from the ashes. She knew that the universe was full of surprises, and that the greatest fools were those who believed they knew everything. She looked at the Vethkai Archon, still laughing at his own certainty of victory. She looked at the other ambassadors, secure in their power and their contempt, and for the first time in a very long while, the Tessari ambassador felt afraid. Far away, in the human system, Admiral Tanaka's ship jumped through the void toward home. She sat alone in her quarters, looking at the stars streaming past her window. She thought about the warning she had delivered. She thought about the fleet that was coming. She thought about the secret that humanity had kept for 200 years. Her communicator beeped. She answered it. "Admiral," the voice said, "the Council has reviewed your report. They have approved the order." Tanaka closed her eyes. She had hoped this day would never come. She had prayed that humanity would never have to reveal what they had become. But the Vethkai had made their choice. The Concord had made their choice, and now humanity would make theirs. "Begin the awakening," she said. "All ships, all systems, all personnel. It is time." "Understood, Admiral." Beginning the awakening. Tanaka opened her eyes and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the spaces between systems, in the dark places where no one ever looked, humanity's true fleet was stirring. Ships that had been built in secret. Ships that had been hidden for generations. Ships that had been waiting for this moment. 200 years of patience. 200 years of preparation. 200 years of smiling at those who despised them while building something terrible in the shadows. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had been so quiet, and they were going to tremble. The Vethkai Armada moved through space like a swarm of hungry predators. 10,000 warships traveled in perfect formation, their engines burning bright against the endless darkness. Each ship was a weapon of destruction, armed with technology that had conquered 60 species. Together, they were an unstoppable force of death. Commander Krathavel stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the stars slip past on the view screen. He was the Archon's chosen leader for this expedition. A veteran of 17 campaigns, he had personally overseen the extinction of the Krellians. He had watched their cities burn and their people die, and he had felt nothing but satisfaction. This mission would be even easier. The humans were weaker than the Krellians had been. They had fewer ships, less advanced technology, and no allies to call upon. Krathvel estimated the conquest would take less than a week, perhaps 3 days, if the humans were foolish enough to fight. "Commander," his tactical officer said, "we will arrive in the human system within 4 hours." "Excellent," Krathvel replied. "Have the crews prepare for battle. I want no delays when we arrive. Should we attempt communication first? Offer them a chance to surrender?" Krathvel turned to look at his officer. His yellow eyes were cold and flat, like those of a reptile. "No." The Archon's orders were clear. "We are not here to negotiate. We are here to exterminate. Every human being must die. Every human station must be destroyed. Every human ship must be turned to debris. When we are finished, there will be nothing left to show that humanity ever existed." The officer nodded and turned back to his console. He had expected this answer. The Vethkai did not believe in mercy. They believed in power, and power meant the complete destruction of enemies. 4 hours later, the Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human system. Krathvel stood at attention, ready to give the order that would begin the slaughter. The view screen showed nothing. Krathvel blinked. He had expected to see human defense stations. He had expected to see the pathetic human fleet gathered to make a final stand. He had expected something, anything, to destroy. Instead, there was only empty space. "Report," he demanded. "Where are the human defenses?" "Scanning now, Commander." The tactical officer worked his console, his scales rippling with confusion. "I am detecting no active ships in the system. The orbital stations around Earth appear to be abandoned. No power signatures, no life signs, no activity at all. That is impossible. There are billions of humans in this system. They cannot have simply disappeared. Commander, I am detecting scattered debris in several orbital zones. It appears that some structures have been recently dismantled. The materials are gone, but the attachment points remain." Krathvel felt the first stirring of unease in his stomach. He had conquered many species. He knew what a civilization looked like when it prepared to fight. He knew what it looked like when it prepared to flee. This looked like neither. This looked like something else entirely. "Scan the planets," he ordered. "Find where the humans have gone." The tactical officer obeyed. Minutes passed in tense silence as the sensors swept across the system. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Each was examined in detail. "Commander, the scans are complete. The planetary colonies appear to have been evacuated weeks ago. The underground cities on Mars are empty. The cloud stations on Venus are abandoned. The mining facilities in the asteroid belt have been stripped of all equipment. It is as if the humans knew we were coming and removed everything of value before we arrived. That is impossible, Krathvel said again. But his voice was less certain now. Our plans were secret. Only the Archon's inner circle knew the target of this expedition. Commander, there is something else. What? I am detecting anomalies at the edge of the system, strange energy signatures in the outer darkness. They do not match any known technology in our databases. Krathvel walked to the tactical station and looked at the readings himself. The officer was right. There were energy sources out there, far beyond the orbits of the planets, hidden in the spaces where nothing should exist. They were faint, almost invisible to the sensors, but they were there. How many? Krathvel asked. The officer worked his console. His scales had gone pale, which was a sign of extreme stress in Vethkai physiology. I cannot determine an exact number. The signatures they are too scattered, too numerous. Commander, I think there may be thousands of them. Thousands of what? I do not know. Krathvel stared at the readings. Something was very wrong here. The humans had not simply fled. They had prepared. They had known the attack was coming, and they had cleared the battlefield of anything the Vethkai might capture. That spoke of intelligence and planning far beyond what the Concord's reports had suggested. And those energy signatures in the outer darkness. What were they? Contact the Archon, Krathvel ordered. Tell him that the system appears to be evacuated. Request further orders. Commander, there is a problem. Our long-range communications are being blocked. Some kind of interference field has been activated throughout the system. We cannot send messages outside the local area. Now Krathvel felt real fear. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that could block Vethkai communications. Their technology was supposed to be inferior. Their capabilities were supposed to be limited. Everything the Concord knew about humanity said they were a minor species, barely worth noticing. But someone had blocked their communications. Someone had evacuated billions of people without the Concord detecting it. Someone had hidden thousands of energy sources in the outer system where they would not be noticed. Commander, the tactical officer's voice was sharp with alarm. The energy signatures are changing. They are growing stronger. Something is happening out there. Krathvel looked at the view screen. At first, he saw nothing but stars and darkness. Then, slowly, he began to see lights appearing in the void. Lights that had not been there before. Lights that were moving. What is that? He whispered. The lights grew brighter. They spread across the view screen like a wave, emerging from the darkness in every direction. Krathvel watched in growing horror as the count on his tactical display began to rise. 100 lights. 1,000. 10,000. The lights kept appearing. Commander, I am detecting ships. Human ships. They are emerging from hidden positions throughout the outer system. The count is. The tactical officer fell silent. The number on the display had exceeded his ability to process it. Krathvel stood frozen on his bridge, watching the darkness come alive with enemy vessels. Ships larger than anything he had ever seen. Ships that moved with perfect coordination. Ships that surrounded his armada on every side, boxing them in with nowhere to run. How many? Krathvel asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Commander, the final count is approximately 500,000 warships. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 500,000 ships. The Vethkai armada suddenly seemed very small. 10,000 warriors who had come to exterminate a species now found themselves outnumbered 50 to 1. That is impossible, Krathvel said for the third time. But he knew now that it was not impossible. It was simply unexpected. For 200 years, humanity had hidden their true strength. They had smiled and bowed and built in secret, preparing for the day when someone would try to destroy them. That day had come, and the Vethkai had walked directly into a trap. Across the galaxy, the Concord was experiencing its own moment of terror. The Arvani were the watchers. They maintained observation posts throughout known space, monitoring everything that happened in the galaxy. Their sensors and networks were the most advanced in existence. Nothing escaped their attention, or so they had believed. Senior observer Kethran sat in the central monitoring station on the Arvani homeworld, watching her displays with growing disbelief. Reports were flooding in from every corner of the galaxy. Impossible reports, terrifying reports. Human fleets were appearing everywhere. At the borders of HFY space, thousands of warships had emerged from hidden positions. At the approaches to the Kethari homeworlds, more ships had materialized from empty space. The drawn trading lanes were suddenly surrounded by human vessels. The Morhani research stations detected massive energy signatures where nothing should exist. The Tessari diplomatic networks went dark as human ships positioned themselves around key systems, and at the Concord station itself, at the center of the galaxy, a fleet of human warships had appeared without warning. They hung in space around the station, their weapons powered but silent, their intentions unclear. "This cannot be real," one of Kethran's subordinates said. "Where did they all come from? How did they hide this many ships for so long?" Kethran did not answer. She was busy reviewing the data, trying to understand what had happened. 200 years of records flashed across her screen. Every human ship that had ever traveled through Concord space, every trade mission, every diplomatic visit, every seemingly innocent voyage. She saw patterns now that had been invisible before. The human ships had not been traveling randomly. They had been mapping. Every journey had covered a different section of the galaxy. Every route had been carefully chosen to maximize coverage. In 200 years, the humans had created a complete map of Concord space, including regions that the elder races believed were secret. They had also been scouting. The humans had visited every elder race homeworld, every major military installation, every strategic location. They had studied defenses and analyzed patrol patterns and identified weaknesses, all while smiling and trading and pretending to be harmless. And they had been building. Kethran found traces now that she knew what to look for. Energy signatures in dark spaces between stars. Material shipments that did not quite add up. Resource consumption that exceeded what a single system civilization should require. The humans had been constructing ships in secret locations scattered throughout the galaxy. Hidden shipyards in places no one would think to look. Construction facilities that had operated for 200 years, producing warships at an unimaginable rate. 500,000 warships. The number seemed impossible, but the math worked out. If the humans had maintained just 500 hidden shipyards, each producing 50 ships per year, they would have exactly that number after 2 centuries of work. Kethran felt sick. The Arvani prided themselves on knowing everything. They had watched humanity for 200 years and seen nothing but a weak, insignificant species. They had been completely fooled. "What do we do?" her subordinate asked. "We do nothing," Kethran said. "We cannot do anything. Look at these numbers. The combined military strength of all 7 elder races is approximately 80,000 ships. The humans have more than 6 times that number. If they choose to attack, we cannot stop them. But why have they not attacked? If they have this much power, why reveal it without using it?" Kethran thought about this question. It was a good question. The humans had the strength to destroy the Concord. They could have launched a surprise attack and annihilated the elder races before anyone knew what was happening. Instead, they had revealed themselves. They had shown their power without using it. They are making a statement, Kethran realized. They want us to see what they have built. They want us to understand what we are facing. They want us to be afraid. On the Concord station, chaos had erupted. The 7 ambassadors had gathered in the main chamber, shouting at each other as they tried to understand what was happening. The HFY Archon was screaming orders to his absent fleet, not yet realizing that Krathvel could not receive them. The Kethari ambassador was demanding explanations that no one could provide. The Drawn were already calculating how to profit from the new situation. The Morani were fascinated by the technological implications. The Tessari were trying to establish communication with the human fleet. The Zoloth were preparing their defenses, and the Arvani observer was simply staring at her data, unable to believe what she was seeing. "This is outrageous," the Archon roared. "How dare they threaten us? I will destroy every last one of them." "With what?" the Kethari ambassador asked coldly. "Your fleet is currently surrounded in human space. Your homeworld is surrounded by human ships. Every one of our homeworlds is surrounded. We are not in a position to threaten anyone. Then we must negotiate," the Tessari ambassador said. "We must find out what they want. Perhaps we can reach an agreement." "Negotiate?" The Archon's scales flushed dark purple with rage. "I do not negotiate with vermin. I crush them." You are not going to crush anything, the Arvani observer said. Her voice was quiet, but something in it made even the Archon fall silent. I have analyzed the human fleet. Their ships are not just numerous. They are advanced. Their weapon systems are unlike anything in our databases. Their propulsion technology allows them to move faster than our best ships. Their armor is composed of materials we cannot identify. How is that possible? The Morhani ambassador demanded. We have monitored human technology for 200 years. They showed no signs of such advancement. They showed us what they wanted us to see. They hid their true capabilities while studying ours. They learned everything about us while we learned nothing about them. The observer paused. We made a terrible mistake. We assumed that because they were quiet, they were weak. We assumed that because they smiled, they were content. We assumed that because they did not fight back, they could not fight back. What are you saying? The Kethari ambassador asked. I am saying that for 200 years, we treated humanity like insects. We denied them. We mocked them. We planned to exterminate them. And all that time they were preparing for this moment. They knew this day would come. They knew someone would eventually try to destroy them. And they made sure that when that day came, they would be ready. A screen activated on the wall of the chamber. Admiral Tanaka's face appeared, calm and composed. The ambassadors fell silent, staring at the human woman who had warned them just days before. Good evening, Tanaka said. I told you that you should not have done this. I told you that we gave you every chance. Now I think it is time we talked about what comes next. The Archon found his voice. You will die for this. I will personally tear out your— You will do nothing, Tanaka said. Her voice did not rise, but the Archon fell silent anyway. Your fleet is surrounded. Your homeworld is surrounded. Every world you control is within range of our weapons. You have no leverage, no options, and no hope of victory. The only question is whether you will accept this reality peacefully, or whether we will have to demonstrate our power more directly. What do you want? The Kethari ambassador asked. He was the oldest of them, and he was the first to understand that the old order had ended. We want very simple things, Tanaka said. We want a seat at the Concord table. We want equal rights to colonize unclaimed space. We want to be treated as what we are, a civilization worthy of respect. And we want an apology. An apology? The Dran ambassador asked. Yes. A formal apology, broadcast to every world in the galaxy, for 2 centuries of contempt and disrespect. You will acknowledge that you treated humanity unfairly. You will acknowledge that we deserve better, and you will promise to do better in the future. The Archon laughed bitterly. You have 500,000 ships and all you want is an apology. You could conquer us all. Yes, Tanaka agreed. We could. We could destroy every elder race. We could burn your homeworlds and enslave your peoples and take everything you have. We have the power to do it. We have spent 200 years building the power to do it. She paused, and her eyes seemed to look into the souls of every ambassador in the chamber. But we are not you. We did not build this fleet to conquer. We built it to survive. We built it because we knew that someday, someone would try to exterminate us, and we wanted to make sure that would never happen. Now that day has come, and you have seen what we can do. But we do not want war. We never wanted war. We want peace. Real peace. Peace based on mutual respect, instead of fear. The chamber was silent. The ambassadors looked at each other, trying to process what they were hearing. They had expected threats and demands. They had expected the humans to be drunk on their newfound power, eager to take revenge for centuries of humiliation. Instead, they were being offered mercy. You would spare us? The Tisari ambassador asked. After everything we have done? We would, Tanaka said. If you let us. The choice is yours. You can accept our terms and join us in building a new kind of galaxy, one where all species are equal, or you can fight, and we will destroy you. Not because we want to, but because we will never let anyone threaten our children again. She leaned forward, and her expression hardened. But understand this. We will only make this offer once. If you refuse, if you choose war, then there will be no second chances. We have been patient for 200 years. That patience ends today. Choose wisely. The screen went dark, leaving the ambassadors alone with their thoughts and their fear. The Archon wanted to fight. He wanted to believe that somehow, against all odds, the Vethkai could prevail. But even he could see the truth now. The humans had outplanned them, outbuilt them, and outmaneuvered them at every turn. Fighting was not courage anymore. It was suicide. The Kethari ambassador spoke first. We must accept their terms. We have no other choice. One by one, the other ambassadors nodded. Even the Archon, his scales dull with defeat, could not argue. The age of the elder races was ending. The age of humanity was about to begin. Commander Krathvel stood on his bridge and watched death surround him. The human fleet had finished emerging from their hiding places. 500,000 warships now formed a sphere around his armada, a wall of metal and weapons that blocked every possible escape route. The smallest of the human ships was larger than his flagship. The largest were so massive that his sensors could barely track them. They hung in space like predators waiting for their prey to make a mistake. "Commander," his tactical officer said. His voice was barely a whisper. "What do we do?" Krathvel did not answer immediately. He was staring at the human ships, trying to understand what he was seeing. These were not the crude vessels that the Concord reports had described. These were weapons of war designed by a species that had spent 2 centuries preparing for exactly this moment. The human ships had no wasted space, no decorations, no unnecessary features. Every part of their design served a purpose. Their hulls were angular and dark, built to deflect sensor scans and absorb enemy fire. Their weapon systems were integrated into the hull itself, allowing them to fire in any direction without repositioning. Their engines were massive, capable of speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their size, and there were so many of them. The sphere of ships stretched in every direction, layer upon layer of warships arranged in formations so precise they looked like they had been placed by a machine. No, Krathvel realized, not placed by a machine, placed by beings who had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times, who had drilled and trained and prepared for the day they would finally reveal themselves. "Commander?" the tactical officer asked again. "We wait," Krathvel said. "We cannot fight. We cannot run. We can only wait and see what they want from us." As if in response to his words, a communication channel opened. Admiral Tanaka's face appeared on his view screen. She was sitting in a command chair on her own bridge, surrounded by officers who moved with quiet efficiency. She looked at Krathvel with eyes that held no hatred, no anger, no triumph. She looked at him the way a person might look at a puzzle that had finally been solved. "Commander Krathvel," she said, "welcome to human space. I apologize for the unusual greeting, but I am sure you understand our caution." Krathvel forced himself to respond. His throat was dry with fear, but he was still a Vethkai warrior. He would not show weakness, even in defeat. "Admiral Tanaka, it seems I have underestimated your species." "You have. Many have made the same mistake. It is a common error when dealing with those who choose patience over aggression." Tanaka leaned forward slightly. "I want you to understand something, Commander. We did not build this fleet because we wanted war. We built it because your Archon gave us no choice. For 200 years, we watched the Concord abuse its power. We watched species like the Krellians be exterminated for the crime of existing in the wrong place. We knew that someday, someone would come for us too. We decided to be ready. You deceived us all," Krathvel said. "Your diplomats smiled while your builders constructed this armada. Your traders mapped our space while pretending to do business. Everything you showed us was a lie. No, everything we showed you was true. We are traders. We are diplomats. We are peaceful beings who wanted nothing more than to be left alone. But we are also survivors. We have learned that the universe is not kind to those who cannot defend themselves. So we built defenses. We hoped we would never need them. We hoped the Concord would eventually accept us as equals. We hoped that peace could be achieved through patience and good faith." Tanaka's expression hardened. "Your Archon ended those hopes. He decided to exterminate our species because he wanted our system. He did not ask for negotiation. He did not offer terms. He simply announced that we would cease to exist. That choice forced our hand. So what happens now?" Krathvel asked. "Will you destroy us? Will you take your revenge for centuries of mistreatment? That depends on you, Commander, and on your Archon, and on the other elder races who are currently watching this conversation." Krathvel blinked. "Watching? Yes. We are broadcasting this exchange to every observation post in the galaxy. The Concord can see what is happening here. They can see your fleet surrounded by ours. They can see the balance of power that exists between us, and they can see what choice you make next. The commander understood then. This was not just a military operation. It was a demonstration. The humans were showing the entire galaxy what they were capable of. They were proving that the old order had ended, and that a new power had risen to challenge the elder races. "What choice are you offering?" he asked. "A simple one. You can surrender your fleet peacefully and return to Vethkai space with a single ship. You will carry our message to your Archon and to the Concord. You will tell them what you have seen here today, and you will give them a chance to accept the new reality without further bloodshed. And if I refuse?" Tanaka did not answer with words. She simply nodded to one of her officers. A moment later, one of the human ships at the edge of the formation moved. It was a small vessel, barely a quarter the size of Krathvel's flagship. It positioned itself in front of a piece of space debris that had been floating nearby since the Armada arrived. The human ship fired. Krathvel watched in horror as a beam of pure white light lanced out from the vessel. It struck the debris, and for a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then the debris simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no scattering of fragments, no cloud of gas. One moment the debris was there. The next moment it was not. It had been erased from existence. "We call that weapon the nullifier," Tanaka said calmly. "It disrupts the bonds that hold matter together at the quantum level. Objects struck by it do not explode or burn. They simply stop existing. We have other weapons as well. Gravitational lances that can crush a ship into a ball of metal. Disruption fields that disable all electronic systems within range. And something we call the silence, which I hope we never have to demonstrate." Krathvel felt his legs weaken. The Vethkai had conquered 60 species with weapons they believed were the most advanced in the galaxy. They had never encountered anything like what the humans had just shown him. "You could destroy us all," he said. "Every ship in my armada. Every ship in every elder race fleet. You have the power to rule the entire galaxy." "Yes," Tanaka agreed. "We do. And that is exactly why we are offering you peace instead of war." "I do not understand." "No, you would not. The Vethkai have always believed that power exists to be used, that the strong should dominate the weak, that mercy is weakness and compassion is foolishness." Tanaka shook her head. "We believe differently. We believe that true strength is shown not by what you destroy but by what you choose to protect. We built this fleet to protect our people, our children, our future. We did not build it to become the next tyrants of the galaxy." She stood from her chair and walked closer to the screen. Her eyes locked on Krathvel's. "Commander, I want you to listen very carefully. What I am about to tell you is the most important thing you will ever hear. The Vethkai have spent thousands of years proving their power by crushing those weaker than themselves. You have enslaved and exterminated and terrorized your way across the stars. You have never met a species that could stop you. Until now." She placed her hands behind her back, standing straight like the military officer she was. "Today, you have met humanity, and humanity is offering you something no species you have ever conquered was able to offer. A choice. You can choose to accept our terms and return home in peace, or you can choose to fight and be destroyed. But understand this. If you choose to fight, we will not stop with your armada. We will pursue this conflict until the Vethkai Dominion no longer exists, not because we want to, but because we will never allow a species that tried to exterminate us to remain a threat to our children." "You would commit genocide?" Krathvel asked. He found the concept almost impossible to comprehend. The humans had just spoken about mercy and protection, and now they were threatening to destroy his entire species? "If you force us to, yes. That is not a threat. It is a statement of fact. We have seen what the Vethkai do to those who show them weakness. We have studied your history. We know that you do not forget, and you do not forgive. If we allow your dominion to survive after this defeat, you will spend the next 1,000 years planning revenge. You will build new fleets. You will develop new weapons. And someday, when you think you are strong enough, you will come for us again. We cannot allow that." Tanaka returned to her chair and sat down. "So here is your choice, Commander. You can accept our mercy today, and convince your Archon to accept it as well. You can help build a new galaxy where the Vethkai are partners instead of predators. Or you can refuse, and we will begin the process of ensuring that the Vethkai never threaten anyone again. The choice is yours. But I warn you, we will only make this offer once. Think very carefully before you answer. Crathvell stood in silence for a long moment. He thought about his fleet, trapped and helpless. He thought about his homeworld, surrounded by human ships. He thought about his people, who had spent millennia believing they were the most powerful species in the galaxy. And then he thought about his children, his daughters, who lived in the capital city of the Dominion, his grandchildren, who had only just learned to walk. They were depending on him to make the right decision, not the proud decision, not the honorable decision, the right decision. I accept your terms, he said. I will return to the Archon and deliver your message, but I cannot promise he will listen. He is proud. He will not accept defeat easily. I know, Tanaka said. That is why we are sending more than just a message. She gestured to her officers, and the view screen split to show images from around the galaxy. Crathvell saw Vethkai space, surrounded by human fleets. He saw the Kethari homeworlds, their ancient defenses looking pitiful against the ships that surrounded them. He saw every elder race territory, each one boxed in by human warships. The Archon is watching this conversation, Tanaka said. He can see what you see. He knows that refusing our terms means war on every front. He knows that his fleets are outmatched and his worlds are vulnerable. He will make his own choice based on what he sees today. Crathvell understood. The humans were not just defeating the Vethkai armada. They were defeating the entire concept of elder race supremacy. They were showing every species in the galaxy that the old powers could no longer do whatever they wanted. One ship, Crathvell said. You will allow me to leave with one ship? Yes. Choose your best crew. Take your observations and your recordings. Return to your Archon, and tell him what you have witnessed. Tell him that humanity offers peace or war, and the choice is his. And if he chooses war? Tanaka smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you should tell your family goodbye before you return here. Because if war is what your Archon wants, then war is what he will get. And it will be the last war the Vethkai Dominion ever fights. The communication ended. Crathvell stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by officers who were looking at him for guidance. Behind them, through the view screen, 500,000 human warships waited in perfect silence. Prepare a shuttle, Crathvell said. Select 100 of our best officers. We are leaving. Commander, what about the rest of the fleet? What about the other ships? They will wait here until we return. The humans have given their word that they will not attack unless provoked. Crathvell paused. I believe them. If they wanted us dead, we would already be dead. He walked to the center of his bridge and looked at the human ships one last time. They were beautiful, in a terrible way. Beautiful in their power and their precision and their deadly purpose. Humans, he said quietly to himself. The quiet ones. The meek inheritors of nothing. He laughed bitterly. We were fools. We looked at them and saw insects. We should have looked closer. We should have seen what they were building in the dark. Across the galaxy, the transmission had ended, but its effects were just beginning. The Concord chamber was in chaos. The ambassadors were shouting at each other, demanding explanations and assigning blame. The Vethkai Archon was screaming orders to fleets that could not respond. The Kethari were trying to calculate the odds of survival. The Drawn were already planning how to adapt their trading networks to the new reality. But outside the station, the human fleet waited in silence. Patient, powerful, ready. They had been patient for 200 years. They could wait a little longer for the elder races to accept the inevitable. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Battle of Seoul was not really a battle at all. It was a demonstration. Admiral Tanaka had given the Vethkai Armada 16 hours to begin their withdrawal. Crathvell had departed in his single ship, carrying the human message back to his Archon. The remaining Vethkai fleet waited in terrified silence, surrounded by an ocean of human warships. But the Archon was proud. He was arrogant. And he was very, very angry. Attack, he ordered from his throne room on the Vethkai homeworld. All ships, attack immediately. Show these humans that the Vethkai do not bow to anyone. The Vethkai commanders in the human system received the order. They knew it was suicide. They knew they had no chance of victory, but they were Vethkai warriors, bred for conquest and taught to never show fear. They obeyed. 9,999 ships powered their weapons and prepared to charge. They formed into attack formations, their engines glowing bright as they accelerated toward the human lines. Plasma cannons charged, missile bays opened, energy shields activated. They fired everything they had. The first volley was impressive by any standard. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the human fleet. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness like artificial stars. Energy beams cut through space in brilliant lines of destruction. Not a single shot reached its target. The human ships did not even move. Small objects separated from their hulls, spreading out in a web of defensive points. These interceptors were no larger than a person, but they were incredibly fast and incredibly accurate. They tracked every incoming projectile and destroyed it before it could travel more than a few thousand kilometers. The Vethkai fired again, and again, and again. Each time, their weapons were neutralized before they could do any harm. Then the humans responded. A single ship moved forward from the human formation. It was small by human standards, barely 100 meters long. It positioned itself in the path of the Vethkai charge and activated something. The Vethkai called it the Silence afterward, though that was not its true name. Every ship within range of the device simply stopped. Their engines died. Their weapons went cold. Their computers crashed. Their life support systems began to fail. 10,000 warships, the pride of the Vethkai Dominion, became 10,000 dead hulks floating helplessly in the void. It had taken less than 3 seconds. The human ship retreated back to its position in the formation. No weapons had been fired. No missiles had been launched. No beams had cut through the darkness. The humans had disabled an entire armada without destroying anything. Admiral Tanaka's voice broadcast across every frequency in the system. We have demonstrated our power. We have shown that we could destroy your fleet with a single command, but we have chosen not to. We have disabled your ships, not destroyed them. Your crews are still alive, though they will need rescue soon before their life support fails completely. She paused, letting her words sink in. This is your last chance, Archon. We are sending rescue ships to save your warriors. We will return them to Vethkai space, unharmed. In exchange, you will accept our terms and end this conflict before it begins. If you refuse, we will stop being gentle. The choice is yours, but you must make it now. On the Vethkai homeworld, the Archon watched the destruction of his armada with growing horror. He had ruled the Dominion for 300 years. He had crushed rebellions and conquered civilizations and never once faced defeat. He had believed the Vethkai were invincible. Now he knew better. The humans had not just beaten his fleet. They had humiliated it. They had shown that the mighty Vethkai military was less than nothing compared to their power. They had broken the myth of Vethkai supremacy in front of the entire galaxy. But they had also shown mercy. They could have killed every warrior in that fleet. They could have turned 10,000 ships into 10,000 graves. Instead, they had disabled them and offered to save the crews. The Archon did not understand mercy. It was a concept that did not exist in Vethkai culture. The strong destroyed the weak. That was the natural order of things. Why would anyone show compassion to enemies they had already defeated? Unless mercy was its own form of power. Unless showing restraint was more impressive than showing destruction. Unless the humans were proving something that the Archon had never considered. That true strength came not from what you could destroy but from what you chose to spare. My lord, one of his advisors said carefully, the human fleet around our homeworld has not attacked. Their ships remain in position, but their weapons are not powered. They appear to be waiting for your response. The Archon looked at the tactical display. Thousands of human ships surrounded his world. Millions of his people lived on that planet. His family lived on that planet. If the humans decided to attack, there was nothing he could do to stop them. He thought about his legacy. He thought about being remembered as the Archon who led the Vethkai to extinction. He thought about his children and their children, who would never exist if he made the wrong choice. For the first time in his life, the Archon chose caution over pride. Contact the humans, he said. Tell them we accept their terms. The news spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. The mighty Vethkai had surrendered. The Archon who had boasted of exterminating humanity had instead been forced to bow before them. The balance of power that had existed for 12,000 years had been shattered in a single day. In the Concord chamber, the remaining ambassadors gathered to discuss the new reality. The Kethari ambassador sat in silence, his ancient face unreadable. The Tessari ambassador was speaking rapidly with her aides. The Drawn were already calculating new trade opportunities. The Morhani were debating the scientific implications of human technology. The Zoloth were reviewing their defensive capabilities. The Arvani were simply watching, as they always did. Admiral Tanaka appeared on the main screen. She looked tired but satisfied. The crisis had passed without unnecessary bloodshed. That was more than she had dared to hope for. "Ambassadors," she said, "I believe we have much to discuss." "Indeed we do," the Cathari ambassador replied. He was the oldest being in the chamber, with memories that stretched back thousands of years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed the birth of the Concord itself, and now he was watching something new emerge from the ashes of the old order. "You have demonstrated your power, Admiral. You have shown us that humanity is not what we believed it to be. The question now is, what do you intend to do with that power?" "We intend to use it for peace," Tanaka said. "Real peace. Not the false peace of the conquered, where the strong do whatever they want and the weak suffer in silence. We want a galaxy where all species have the same rights and the same opportunities. We want cooperation instead of domination. We want progress instead of stagnation." "Those are fine words," the Tessari ambassador said. She was the most skilled diplomat in the Concord, able to read meaning in every gesture and tone. "But words are easy. What guarantees can you offer that humanity will not simply replace the elder races as the new tyrants of the galaxy?" Tanaka nodded. It was a fair question. Power corrupted. Every species that had ever gained dominance over others had eventually abused that dominance. Why should humanity be any different? "I cannot offer you guarantees," Tanaka admitted. "I cannot promise that humanity will always be virtuous or that we will never make mistakes. We are not perfect beings. We have our own history of violence and oppression and cruelty. We know what we are capable of, both good and bad." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "But I can tell you this. We did not build 500,000 warships because we wanted to conquer the galaxy. We built them because we wanted to survive. We have spent 200 years watching the Concord treat younger species as worthless. We watched the Krellians be exterminated. We watched the Vethkai enslave entire civilizations. We knew that one day, someone would come for us, and we wanted to make sure that when that day came, we would be able to protect our people. And now that you have that protection?" the Cathari ambassador asked. "Now we want to make sure that no other species has to live in fear the way we did. We want to end the age of empires and begin an age of partnership. We want to build a galaxy where a species' worth is not measured by the size of its fleet but by the contribution it makes to the whole." The Dran ambassador laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Very idealistic, Admiral. But idealism does not build economies or maintain order. The galaxy is vast and complex. It cannot be run on good intentions alone." "No, it cannot," Tanaka agreed. "That is why we are not proposing to run the galaxy alone. We are proposing to join the Concord as equals. We will contribute our technology, our resources, and our protection to the common good. In exchange, we expect the same rights and respect as any other member species." "And if we refuse?" the Tessari ambassador asked. "Then we will protect ourselves and let the rest of the galaxy do as it pleases. We will not attack you or try to conquer you. But we will also not help you or share with you. You will face the future alone, knowing that humanity stands apart." The ambassadors exchanged glances. The offer was clear: partnership or isolation. The humans were not threatening war, but they were not begging for acceptance either. They were simply stating their terms and waiting for a response. "There is still the matter of the Vethkai," the Cathari ambassador said. "They have surrendered, but they have not changed. They are still predators by nature. They will not accept this new order easily." "No, they will not," Tanaka acknowledged. "That is why we will be watching them carefully. The Vethkai Dominion will be allowed to continue existing, but under certain conditions. They must release all their slave species. They must reduce their military to defensive levels only. They must allow human observers on their worlds to ensure compliance. If they violate these conditions, we will respond." "You would occupy them?" the Tessari ambassador asked. "Only if necessary. We would prefer to see the Vethkai become productive members of the galactic community. They have strengths that could benefit everyone. Their warriors are brave, their scientists are innovative. Their culture, despite its cruelty, has created works of art and literature that are genuinely impressive. We do not want to destroy them. We want to help them become something better than what they are." The Morani ambassador spoke for the first time. She was the most analytically minded of the group. interested in facts and data rather than politics and persuasion. Admiral, your proposal assumes that species can change their fundamental nature. The Vethkai have been predators for thousands of years. Is it realistic to expect them to become peaceful partners? We do not expect it to happen overnight, Tanaka said. Change takes time. It takes generations. The Vethkai alive today were raised to believe that conquest is their birthright. Their children might believe differently, if given the chance to learn, and their grandchildren might not remember the old ways at all. You think in terms of centuries, the Morani observed. That is unusual for such a young species. We had good teachers, Tanaka replied with a slight smile. The Concord taught us that patience is powerful. You meant it as an insult when you made us wait 200 years for a second star system, but we took the lesson to heart. We learned to think in long timelines. We learned to plan for futures we might not live to see. We learned that the slow path is often the surest path. The Kethari ambassador made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. You learned from our mistakes. Then, perhaps that is the true measure of a species. Not what it creates, but what it learns from others. Perhaps, Tanaka agreed. We have certainly tried to learn. We studied all of you for 200 years. Your strengths and your weaknesses. Your histories and your cultures. Your technologies and your philosophies. We wanted to understand what made the elder races what they are, both good and bad. And what did you conclude? The Tessari ambassador asked. Tanaka considered the question carefully. We concluded that you are much like us. You have the capacity for greatness and the capacity for cruelty. You have built wonders and committed horrors. You have reached for the stars and stumbled in the darkness. The only real difference between humanity and the elder races is that you had 12,000 years more practice. She stood and walked closer to the screen, so that her face filled the view. We are not better than you. We are not wiser or more virtuous or more deserving of power. We are simply newer. We have the advantage of learning from your mistakes without having made them ourselves, and we have the disadvantage of being untested, of not knowing what we will become when we face the challenges you have already faced. So why should we trust you? The Arvani observer asked. She had been silent throughout the discussion, watching and listening. You admit that you might become as bad as we have been. You admit that power corrupts and that humanity is not immune. Why should we believe that your promises of partnership and equality will last? Because you have no choice, Tanaka said simply. The old order is over. We have the power to destroy you, and we have chosen not to. We have the power to dominate you, and we have chosen not to. We are offering you a chance to help build something new, something better than what came before. You can accept that offer or reject it, but either way, the galaxy has changed. Humanity is here now, and we are not going anywhere. The chamber fell silent. The ambassadors looked at each other, each trying to read the thoughts of the others. They were the leaders of the elder races, beings who had shaped galactic civilization for millennia, and now they were being asked to share that power with a species they had dismissed as insignificant just days before. The Kethari ambassador spoke at last. Very well, Admiral. Humanity will be recognized as the 8th elder race of the Concord. You will have a seat at this table and a voice in our councils. Your terms regarding the Vethkai will be accepted, and we will apologize for our treatment of your species over the past 2 centuries. His voice was heavy with the weight of those words. The Kethari had not apologized to anyone in thousands of years. The concept was almost physically painful to express. Thank you, Tanaka said. Her voice was soft but sincere. We accept your apology, and we look forward to building a better future together. The screen went dark. The first phase of the new era had begun. In the human system, rescue ships moved among the disabled Vethkai fleet. Human crews worked alongside surviving Vethkai warriors to restore life support and stabilize damaged systems. The rescued soldiers expected cruelty, expected torture, expected the kind of treatment the Vethkai would have given to defeated enemies. Instead, they received medical care and food and warm blankets. They received kind words and helping hands. They received humanity's strangest and most powerful weapon, compassion. Many of the rescued Vethkai did not understand. They had been raised to believe that mercy was weakness. They expected tricks and traps and hidden agendas, but there were no tricks. The humans simply helped them because they could, because it was the right thing to do, because they wanted to show that the galaxy could be different. Some of the Vethkai warriors looked at their rescuers and felt something they had never felt before. Doubt. Doubt about everything they had been taught. Doubt about the nature of strength and weakness. Doubt about the path their species had chosen. Seeds of change had been planted. It would take years, perhaps decades, for those seeds to grow. But they were there, waiting for their moment. The galaxy was watching, and slowly, gradually, the galaxy was beginning to hope. The Treaty of Soul was signed 6 months after the confrontation that changed the galaxy forever. Representatives from all 8 elder races gathered on Earth, in a great hall built specifically for the occasion. The Kethari came in their ceremonial robes of woven starlight. The Vethkai sent the Archon himself, his scales dull with humiliation but his signature required for legitimacy. The Dron brought gifts of rare crystals and ancient technologies. The Morhani carried datapads filled with research proposals for joint scientific ventures. The Tessari smiled their diplomatic smiles and said their diplomatic words. The Zoloth stood solid and patient, builders ready to construct a new era. The Arvani watched everything, as they always did, and humanity welcomed them all. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood at the head of the great table where the treaty would be signed. She had aged visibly in the past months. The stress of managing the transition from confrontation to negotiation had taken its toll, but her eyes were bright with satisfaction as she looked at the assembled representatives. 200 years ago, she said, humanity came to the Concord as petitioners. We asked for nothing more than the right to exist alongside you in peace. We were denied. We were mocked. We were treated as insects beneath the notice of the great elder races. She paused, letting her gaze travel across every face in the room. Today, we gather as equals, not because we threatened you with destruction, although we could have, not because we forced you to accept us, although we did, but because we showed you something that the galaxy had forgotten, that power without wisdom is empty, that strength without mercy is weakness, and that the true measure of a civilization is not what it can destroy but what it chooses to protect. She picked up the ceremonial stylus that would record her signature on the treaty. This treaty creates a new Concord, an 8th seat for humanity at the table of galactic governance, equal rights for all member species to colonize unclaimed space, a universal declaration that no species shall be exterminated for the crime of existing, and a commitment, from all of us, to build a future that our children can be proud of. She signed her name with a firm hand. One by one, the other representatives stepped forward to add their signatures. The Kethari ambassador moved slowly, his ancient body creaking with every step, but his signature was clear and strong. The Dron representative signed quickly, eager to return to business. The Morhani took her time, studying the document with scientific precision before committing. The Tessari signed with a flourish, already planning how to leverage the new order for her species' advantage. The Zoloth ambassador simply pressed his manipulator to the document, leaving an imprint that would last for millennia. The Archon was last. He stood before the treaty for a long moment, his yellow eyes burning with emotions that humans could not easily read. Rage, certainly. Humiliation, without doubt. But there was something else there too, something that might have been respect. You could have destroyed us, he said to Tanaka. You had every right. We tried to exterminate your species. We would have shown no mercy to you. We know, Tanaka replied. But we are not you. We never wanted to be you. We wanted to be better. The Archon made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are strange creatures, humans. You build the greatest military force the galaxy has ever seen, and then you refuse to use it. You defeat your enemies and then you help them stand again. You win wars and then you offer peace. I do not understand you, but I am beginning to think that perhaps I should try. He signed the treaty. The hall erupted in careful, diplomatic applause. History had been made. The galaxy had changed. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 500,000 human warships returned to their hidden places, their mission complete. 10 years passed. The galaxy was different now. Human ships traveled freely through conquered space, their designs no longer hidden, their technologies shared with species that had once looked down on them. Human scientists worked alongside Morani researchers in joint laboratories. Human traders competed with the Dron in markets across 1,000 worlds. Human diplomats helped mediate disputes that had festered for centuries. The Vethkai Dominion had changed as well, though slowly and painfully. The slave species had been freed, as the treaty required. Some had chosen to leave Vethkai space entirely, seeking new homes among more welcoming civilizations. Others had stayed, working to build new relationships with their former masters. The Archon had died 3 years after the treaty signing. Some said he had lost the will to live in a galaxy where the Vethkai were no longer supreme. Others said he had finally understood what humanity had been trying to teach him, and had died of shame. His successor was younger and more pragmatic. She understood that the old ways were gone and that adaptation was necessary for survival. Krathvel, the commander who had led the failed invasion of human space, had become an unlikely advocate for change. He spent his days traveling between Vethkai worlds, telling his story to anyone who would listen. He spoke of the human ships that had surrounded his fleet. He spoke of the mercy they had shown to defeated enemies. He spoke of the doubt that had taken root in his heart and had never stopped growing. "I was raised to believe that strength meant conquest," he would say. "I was taught that mercy was weakness and compassion was foolishness. The humans showed me that I was wrong. They had the power to destroy us, and they chose not to. They had the right to revenge, and they offered peace instead. That is true strength. That is power worthy of respect." Not all Vethkai agreed with him. Many still dreamed of the old ways, of conquest and domination and the glory of battle. But their numbers were shrinking with each passing year. The young Vethkai, raised in the new era, had no memory of the old supremacy. They saw humans not as enemies but as examples of what a species could become. The Conquered continued its work, now with 8 voices instead of 7. Humanity proved to be a stabilizing influence, neither too aggressive nor too passive. When disputes arose, human mediators often found solutions that satisfied all parties. When injustices were discovered, human advocates spoke for the voiceless. When threats emerged from beyond known space, human ships were first to respond, but humanity never forgot what it had built in the darkness. The 500,000 warships remained hidden in their secret places, ready to emerge at a moment's notice. Human children were still taught the history of the long silence, the 2 centuries when their ancestors smiled and planned and prepared. They were taught that peace was precious and that it must be protected with vigilance and strength. The galaxy learned to look at humanity differently. The elder races had once seen them as insects, as meek creatures beneath notice or concern. Now they saw something else entirely. They saw a species that had turned patience into power. They saw a civilization that had transformed contempt into motivation. They saw beings who had chosen mercy when destruction would have been easier, and they saw themselves through new eyes. The Kethari, oldest of the elder races, began to question traditions that had gone unchallenged for millennia. Why had they treated younger species with such disdain? What might they have learned if they had listened instead of lectured? The ancient ambassador who had signed the Treaty of Soul spent his final years writing a history of Kethari failures, a catalogue of missed opportunities and unnecessary cruelties that he hoped would guide future generations toward better choices. The Drun discovered that fair trading was more profitable in the long run than exploitation. Species that were treated as partners instead of resources became loyal customers and innovative competitors. The Drun economy grew faster under the new order than it ever had under the old. The Morhani found that scientific progress accelerated when knowledge was shared freely. Human researchers brought fresh perspectives to ancient problems. Joint projects produced breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. The universe revealed its secrets more willingly to those who worked together. Even the Vethkai, slowly and painfully, began to find new purposes for their warrior traditions. Some became protectors rather than conquerors, defending weaker species from threats that emerged from the unknown regions. Others channeled their aggression into sports and competitions that satisfied the need for combat without causing harm. A few even followed Krathvel's example, becoming teachers who helped other species understand and overcome their own violent tendencies. The galaxy was not perfect. Conflicts still arose. Injustices still occurred. Species still struggled with their own worst impulses. But things were better than they had been. Progress, however slow, was being made. 50 years after the Treaty of Soul, Admiral Yuki Tanaka passed away peacefully in her sleep. She had retired from military service decades earlier, returning to the small coastal town in Japan where she had been born. She had spent her final years tending a garden overlooking the sea, watching the stars come out each night, and telling stories to her grandchildren. Her funeral was the largest in human history. Representatives from all 8 elder races attended. The Cathari sent their most senior ambassador. The Vethkai sent Krathvel himself, now ancient and honored among his people. The Drawn sent gifts of tribute. The Morhani named a research station in her honor. The Tisari declared a day of remembrance across their entire civilization, and humanity mourned the woman who had given them their future. She was not just a military leader, the human president said in his eulogy. She was a philosopher of power. She understood something that many species never learn, that true strength is measured not by what you can destroy, but by what you choose to protect. She built the greatest fleet in galactic history, and she used it to create peace. She could have been a conqueror, and she chose to be a guardian. She could have been a tyrant, and she chose to be a servant. The president paused, looking out at the assembled mourners from 100 worlds. Yuki Tanaka saved humanity. But more than that, she showed the galaxy what humanity could be. Patient, powerful, merciful, wise. We will never forget her, and we will spend the rest of our existence trying to live up to her example. The sun set over the ocean. The stars emerged, one by one, each one a reminder of the vast civilization that humanity now helped to lead. Somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness, the 500,000 warships waited in eternal vigilance. They would probably never be needed again. But they would always be ready, just in case, because humanity had learned the lesson that the galaxy had tried to teach them 200 years ago. The universe was not kind to those who could not defend themselves. Peace was a precious thing that required strength to protect, and patience, properly applied, was the greatest weapon of all. 100 years after the Treaty of Sol, a young human historian traveled to the Concord station to research the events that had transformed the galaxy. She spent months in the archives, reading documents and viewing recordings and interviewing species who remembered the old order. At the end of her research, she sat down to write the introduction to her history. She thought for a long time about how to describe what humanity had done. She considered many phrases: the Great Emergence, the Peaceful Revolution, the New Dawn. In the end, she chose different words. For 200 years, she wrote, the elder races treated humanity as nothing. They denied us the stars. They mocked our dreams. They planned our extinction. They believed that because we were quiet, we were weak. They believed that because we smiled, we were content. They believed that because we did not fight back, we could not fight back. She paused, looking out the window at the station's central plaza, where beings from a dozen species mingled in peaceful commerce and conversation. They were wrong. Humanity was not weak. We were waiting. We were building. We were preparing for the day when we would have to prove our worth to a galaxy that had written us off as irrelevant. And when that day came, we proved it in the most unexpected way possible. She returned to her writing. We showed mercy. We offered peace. We demonstrated that power without wisdom is empty and that strength without compassion is meaningless. We built 500,000 warships and used them to save our enemies instead of destroy them. We won the greatest war in galactic history without firing a single shot, in anger. She smiled and wrote her final words. The elder races learned to fear humanity that day. But more importantly, they learned to respect us. And in the end, they learned to trust us. Because we proved that we were not just powerful, we were wise enough to use that power well. That is the legacy of humanity. That is what we gave to the galaxy. And that is why, after all these years, we are still here, still watching, still waiting, still ready, and still, above all else, hoping for peace. The historian finished her introduction and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the spaces between worlds, the silent fleet waited, patient, powerful, ready to emerge again if the need ever arose. But the need had not arisen, and with each passing year, it became less likely that it ever would, because the galaxy had learned its lesson. And humanity had taught it. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never mistake patience for weakness. Never assume that those who choose peace cannot make war. And never, ever, forget what humanity built in the dark. The galaxy trembled once. It remembered forever. And that was exactly what humanity had intended.